A 32-year-old man was gored to death by a steer in the running with the bulls in Spain. A pilot in Colorado died in a crash after losing control of the plane. A couple's two young children watched as their parents climbed over a safety barrier on a cliff and fell to their deaths. What do you think all of these people were doing at the time of their death, along with the other 259 reported deceased between 2011 and 2017? What were they doing at the time of their death? What do you think? They were posing for a selfie. I think most of us know what a selfie is, right? It's when you take the phone and you turn around and you take a picture of yourself with whatever is going on behind you. And this picture is usually not just for us, it's to show to other people, for other people to see. Many researchers have used the selfie, which I think is a word in Webster's dictionary now, to as evidence to suggest that society is becoming more and more narcissistic, or that young people are becoming more and more narcissistic, or that this generation is more narcissistic than previous ones. But of course, it depends on who you listen to and what research you look at. Seems like there's just as many researchers who indicate that self-absorption, self-centeredness has always been one of our problems, and this is just one more case of the older generation, speaking down to the newer generation. Back in my day, we didn't do that kind of thing. Back in my day, it was better than it is now. The term narcissism comes from the Greek myth about Narcissus, who was a Greek youth who fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. Well, of course it was a youth. Of course it was a young person. Probably not a young person who came up with the myth, though. Even Socrates, over 2,400 years ago, said this. He said, the children now, implying that back in his day, back when he was a kid, it wasn't like this, man. But the children now, Socrates says, love luxury, they have bad manners, contempt for authority, and they show disrespect for elders. That was over 2,400 years ago. So it seems as if it's always been easy to speak disparagingly about the generation that comes after ours, or about another group of people, rather than looking inward at ourselves. When it comes to those people who died in the middle of posing for a selfie, it's easy to point the finger at them and say, man, how important was self-love or self-promotion in that moment that you would take these incredible risks. But here's the thing. It's not a generational problem. This is a human problem. You put a smartphone in the hands of somebody 20 or 30, 40 years ago, put the same technology in their hands, you'd have the same percentage of people getting wrapped up in the selfie. You don't even need a smartphone or take a selfie to be wrapped up in yourself. The quote is often attributed to Benjamin Franklin, who asked, do you want to know what the smallest parcel or package is? A man wrapped up in himself. It's a human problem. In fact, it was the baby boomers who were dubbed the me generation by writer Tom Wolfe, who argued that it was a time for self-fulfillment. It was the dawn of all new kinds of trends, like jogging, all kinds of health trends. Apparently, a lot of people wore windbreakers, and it was just as much of a fashion statement as it was about exercise. It was the dawn of the self-help books. There was unapologetic hedonism and a host of new lifestyle choices that were about promoting the self or about the self rather than the social or faith-based institutions from which people were beginning to flee like never before. It's a human problem. Years ago, a notable chaplain preached the shortest sermon in his college's history. The title of the sermon was pretty darn long, though. This was the title of his sermon. Imagine this being printed in the bulletin. The title of his sermon was, "What does Christ answer when we ask, 'Lord, what's in religion for me?'" That was the title of his sermon. Then the complete content of his sermon was one word: nothing. So what does Christ answer when we ask, "Lord, what's in religion for me?" Nothing. He later explained that that one-word sermon was meant for the people who were brought up on the gimme, gimme gospel. When asked how long it took him to prepare that message, he said 20 years. So this has always been a problem, even among people of faith. Self-absorption, self-centeredness, self-promotion. It's no wonder that less and less people are coming to worship. I'm not just talking about our churches, and I'm not just talking since the pandemic, even before the pandemic. With the cultural taboo now lifted, the cultural taboo of not coming to church lifted, people now can easily begin to wonder, well, okay, then what's in it for me? What's in it for me? There's nothing for me over there. There's nothing for me or my family happening over there. And that kind of reality, worship would be completely useless and frankly, pretty silly. Praying, singing, partaking in the sacrament of Holy Communion, hearing a word from the Bible, gathering together as the body of Christ, regardless of our differences, showing up for this or that opportunity in service or devotion. Yeah, what's the point? When we're looking at it like it's about self-service. Well, today's passage is about the Transfiguration event. And it's a challenge to all of our self-centeredness because the Transfiguration event was not about us. It was not about the disciples. It wasn't something that they were to make something out of for their own use, just like it's not something for us to make something out of for our own use. It was simply an event with Jesus Christ at the center, an event that uplifted and promoted Jesus, period. And after 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter and James and John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them, and his clothes became radiant, intensely white, as no one on earth could bleach them. And there appeared to them Elijah with Moses, and they were talking with Jesus. And Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." For he did not know what to say, for they were terrified. And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the cloud, "This is my beloved Son, listen to him." And suddenly, looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them, but Jesus only. And as they were coming down the mountain, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen, until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Now, if you've ever sat through a sermon on this passage or endured one even from me, it might have been what I preached this time 3 years ago in the lectionary. If you've already sat through that, then you probably know how this is supposed to go. I'm supposed to point the finger at Peter and chalk this up as just another time when knucklehead Peter gets it wrong. I'm supposed to scold Peter for wanting to stay up on that mountain and have that mountaintop experience. And then I'm supposed to tell you that real discipleship is not about staying up on the mountain, but about going down the mountain into the valley, into the grit and grind of everyday life, as one person put it, where real discipleship takes place. But I'm not going to do it. That sentiment might be right, that's about discipleship and all, but just looking at this passage today and taking it for what it is, I don't think that interpretation is really quite right. Isn't Peter right here? Isn't Peter right when he says, Rabbi, it is good for us to be here? Why is that so often seen as a negative comment? Frankly, it seems like if it's anything, it's the understatement of the year, as one person put it. Yeah, it's good for us to be here, Lord. It is good for us to be here in your presence. It is good for us to be here in the presence of divine love. This is my Son, the beloved, God says. It sounds a lot like what God says at Jesus' baptism. But it's a little different here. At his baptism, God says, you are my beloved Son, speaking to Jesus. Here at the Transfiguration event, he is saying, this is my beloved Son. He's not speaking to Jesus as much as he's speaking to the others that are around. This is my Son. It reminds me of maybe a proud dad at a ball game or a graduation who nudges the guy next to him that he may not even know and say, hey, that's my boy. That's my boy over there. This is my Son. In fact, in Mark's gospel, no one else is called God's Son. Not Moses, not Elijah, not John the Baptist. Only Jesus is the beloved Son. He's unique, he's one of a kind, and he's dearly loved by the Father for that reason. So, to God, the Transfiguration event doesn't seem to be an occasion to go back down the mountain. To God, the Transfiguration event seems simply to be an opportunity to declare from a mountaintop his love for the Son. One person notes that there's a translation of Matthew 17:5, which is where this event takes place in his gospel, where God says, this is my beloved Son in whom I take delight. At the Transfiguration event, then, Peter was in the presence of pure delight, pure love. It's no wonder that in Mark he says, it is good for us to be here, or it is good that we are here. Could it be that Peter simply takes delight in Jesus because God does? Could it be that when in the presence of something that seems like the fullness of God's love and delight, that there is no place for the self, only a desire to make a place for Jesus and to stand amazed at his presence, stand amazed in his presence for as long as possible. Peter does seem quite content up on that mountain. Why would we ever want to drag Peter back down that mountain with us to do something, our broken, self-centered selves deem more useful than basking in the light of God's glory? Well, maybe we do that because rather than being lost in wonder, love, and praise, as Wesley's hymn puts it, we are lost in ourselves, asking, what's in it for me? What's in it for my family, my kids? Why come to church? Why partake in the life of the church? Why worship? Why do Holy Communion? Why build a dwelling place on top of a mountain? Why give to a complete stranger? Why forgive somebody who has wronged me? It all seems so ridiculous. Well, today's Valentine's Day, February the 14th, the day the early church either chose at random or because it was the same time of year where a pagan festival took place and they wanted to Christianize it. A day that's named after either one or two men named Valentine, we're really not sure, but who were certainly martyred for reasons greater than sending a Hallmark card. On a day like today, we can answer some of these questions about worship with some other questions. Why kiss or hug somebody just because it's February 14th? Why send them roses, chocolates, or a card? Or write a cheesy poem? Or put on your best dress or suit and go out and spend way too much money on food? It all seems so ridiculous. Foolish, even. But not if you are the one who's in love. Amen.